Welcome to this week's edition of Humbled by Grace. I'm Alex McCary. This is Mickey, my friend Ovi, and as you all know, our other co-host Alex Baudin. This week we're talking about a very controversial topic that gets people very heated, but hopefully we'll be able to try to give some very well thought out, intellectual but calm and respectful opinions on this subject. And the subject that we'll be discussing today is abortion. So I'll hand it over to Alex. Take it away.
So with the topic of abortion, there's a lot of things to be taken in consideration. So I'm going to go around and ask everybody their stance on abortion, when it's acceptable, and when it's not acceptable. And we'll just start it off like that. A clear cut yes or no from everybody. Is abortion okay in any circumstance? Ovi.
Any circumstance, meaning could there be, by your question you mean, could there be any circumstances
That
in which
abortion,
abortion is okay?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some situations that we could look at and take into consideration. For example, if the baby is growing or there is some kind of health risks involved in which both the child and the mother's health or life are in danger, that would be, I think, a situation where all the variables would need to be taken into consideration. So let me clarify that. Not is the mom's life potentially in danger. Both the child growing and the mother, they're both in danger if the pregnancy continues of dying. Very high possibility. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, what those situations might be, but that's something that I have thought about in the past. What if the probabilities is that both will die if the pregnancy continue?
Alex.
The same principle that applies to the taking of any human life in any other circumstance, I think should apply to abortion. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. So if that life is okay to be terminated in a different situation, but similar to that of the abortion, then it should be okay. But in most situations, it's not. A lot of times abortions are done for not very good reasons at all, and they're done very brutally in a torturous, damaging way to the growing human baby. So I think no, but again, if it's a very rare situation where the mother's in danger or the child is in danger, you can't be too black and white in those situations. But then again, from my knowledge, those are very rare situations.
Mike.
I think I'd have to go with Ovi at the same time, but to clarify, I think that you would have to know 100% that you and the child would die. Not that there is a 30% chance that you and the child. I think that you would have to, the doctor would have to be pretty sure that there is about a 99% chance that if you give birth, the child will for sure die and you will die. I
would just want to say though, what if it's 100% chance that the mom will die but the baby will survive? According to you guys, does the mom have some say in that, saying in that situation whether or not she wants to sacrifice her life for the baby?
Would you say that the mother dies 100%?
Mother dies 100%, but the baby lives, or you abort the baby and the mother lives?
I would have to say then the mother at that point in time has to choose what life is it going to be, my life or my child's life at that point in time.
These are some interesting hypothetical situations, but probably we should stick to what's actually going on concerning abortion.
I just want to concede that if the mother's life is in danger, then I would be willing to say that it's more of a gray area and would not straight up say no, absolutely 100%.
Sure, we're talking about 100%.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
purely hypothetical. You can
Yeah.
never be 100% sure someone's going to die if they continue with the pregnancy.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. We were given that example, I think we talked about it once, where the hypothetical situation was you're working at a nuclear power plant. Something goes awry. You can shut off a room which would entrap one of your coworkers and kill him.
Yeah.
But that would guarantee the safety of 4 others. However, if you don't shut him off in that room, there's a possibility that all 5 will die, including the 4. Not a guarantee, a possibility.
Yes.
Let's say probability.
Okay.
Okay? What do? Do you kill off the 1 to guarantee the safety of the 4?
You save them.
Or do you not kill the 1 and
Risk it.
risk it?
Try luck.
Leave it at the probability that all 5 will die.
To kind of continue with this, from a statistic that I read up, 86% of abortions are due to not rape, not that they couldn't financially take care of the child.
Not that the mother's health was in danger.
Not that the mother's health was in danger. So whenever we talk about the majority of abortions, it is just for convenience sake.
I wouldn't say necessarily convenience, but there are reasons such as the education would be slowed down. The mother's education, her career would be slowed down. She doesn't feel like she has
Convenience
enough
sake.
money.
Right, that
Convenience
falls
sake.
underneath the
Yeah.
category
Convenience
of
sake.
convenience sake.
But when you say it like that, convenience, people are
That's the reality
understanding
of it. I wouldn't sugarcoat it. If I say right now I don't want to get a second job because I'm not gonna have time for this. I'm not gonna for convenience sake. I don't want to keep the child because I like to go out on Saturdays, and the
Right.
child's gonna slow me back. I'm 16, and that I'm gonna have to grow up quicker. So
Ooh.
for convenience
Right,
sake,
so
I won't have the child.
the word convenient in itself is not inherently negative.
Yeah.
Of course.
Convenient, I believe, means favorable conditions.
Yeah.
So the conditions would be favorable or preferable if I want to continue on with my master's degree, let's say, without
Yes.
going through a 9-month pregnancy and then having to raise an infant and then a toddler, and right. So
Yeah.
convenient doesn't necessarily mean selfish. Convenient doesn't necessarily mean negative, something negative, right? So that's why we would say for convenience sake, is to create an atmosphere
Yeah.
of favorability, I guess. Not an atmosphere, that's not the right word, but conditions, favorable conditions, right? Or conditions that would work within your favor, I guess, to pursue whatever it is.
Just to think about the convenience sake of this, it'll be some sort of, just to have that kind of mentality that it'll be some sort of a burden to have a child. So it's best off in my situation, if I was a woman, to have an abortion. I'm just thinking, wouldn't you apply that to any situation when you have a child? I think that Ovi obviously had a child a year. How old? Savannah's 2 years old?
She's 3.
3 years old, and you just had another daughter. And I mean, if you're taking it from a convenience standard, aren't children always a headache?
Yeah. They are a burden, if that's what you mean, in one way. You have to figure out how to incorporate another dependent
Isn't it more stress?
with your financial budget. Sorry, you have to figure out, their education.
Yeah.
A lot of the responsibility that affects them throughout their whole life falls on you to make decisions concerning them. It's stressful. At times, it's hard. You definitely need to be more selfless when you become a parent. You need to learn how to sacrifice. And yeah, that's why a lot of that gets chalked up into consideration when someone says, that 16-year-old who had sex and got pregnant, that kid's not ready to be a parent, right? That's one of the things you hear. They're not ready to be a parent. They're in no way financially ready, in no way going to be the type of responsible parent they could be at 25 when they have a career or they have family, whatever. However, that doesn't change the fact that they are, a parent. In my opinion, when you already have a fetus or a baby growing inside of you, you're already a parent in a way, because that human being, and I think it's a human being, their life already depends on you from the moment they're conceived, and that doesn't change after they're born.
No.
They depend on you.
To continue that, so we talked about the statistic of 86% is for convenience sake. Now, guys, in the other percentage, which is 14%, less than 1% of abortions are due to rape. So we might touch that at the end of it, but the rest of it would be, the rest of the 14, which let's say it's 13%, is due to maybe financially you couldn't afford the kid.
No, that's one of the 86%.
Not necessarily. For convenience sake, is if it would be a burden. But if you physically don't have money for yourself, then you have a child, and you can't provide for yourself, and you can't provide for the kid. Now that lumps sum in the 13%.
Okay, we can double check the statistics.
Okay. But let's just move on from there. Now what we're gonna say is we want to kind of talk more about the idea of abortion. Now, a lot of things get thrown around that at 3 months it's not a kid. It's not a child.
Exactly. If I could just
Go
comment
ahead.
on what Ovi said. He said, I think it's the fetus is a baby. That's good that you think that, because what you think is true.
I said I think it's a human being.
A
I
human
would say
being.
baby when
A human being.
Living.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a human being, yeah.
So why
yeah.
don't we just first of all kind of set the foundation and kind of define everything. Obviously, everybody here knows what abortion is, right?
Yeah.
Abortion is terminating a pregnancy
Yeah.
Yes.
through a few different means. We can talk about them in a little bit.
Day after.
There's two sides to this debate, right? Pro-life are the people who are pro going through with the pregnancy. They think terminating the pregnancy is wrong.
Yeah.
They think terminating the pregnancy is murder. Why? Based on this concept that you are terminating the life of a person,
Yes.
right? The pro-choice people would say it's not
a
a
person,
person, right? It's a person in making before he or she becomes a person. It's the basic building blocks of a human being still. Not yet considered a person, not yet. And that's why we have that limit. I think it's, 25 weeks, right? Past 25 weeks, it's now legally considered a person. I think in most places you can't get an abortion after 25 weeks. I could be wrong about that. But they say
In some
25,
places.
25 and under, it's okay. After 25 weeks of gestation, it's not okay. It's immoral.
Because it becomes a person.
It becomes a person.
So then I would ask
Yeah.
you, how is it not a person? How can you distinguish one person from another person? Quick answer is science has discovered something called DNA. And if you analyze the DNA of the mother and you analyze the DNA of the fetus before 25 weeks, even from conception, it's different DNA. It's a separate person. It's not just a part of the mother's body.
DNA is different. It's not part of a mother's body, but a pro-choice person would argue that DNA doesn't make personhood.
Yeah.
We know that bacteria has DNA. It's not a person, though.
No.
Right, so what makes a person? What makes a person?
Okay, so you're distinguishing between person and human being.
Personhood. The status of personhood is that.
So you can be a human being and not be a person.
Mm,
Is the child a human being, or before 25 weeks, is it some other species?
It's not a different species. I would say it's
A human that's not a person.
human in a way.
Yeah.
It's a fetus, a human fetus. They would say. So it's not a human being.
But is
I
that
think
a
that's
different species?
That's where we get being from. I think
Is that a
it's,
different species?
it's not a
Fetus?
No,
So it's a human.
it's a human fetus though. It's not a person. It's not someone who has consciousness. It's not someone. Who,
I would argue a lot of people don't have consciousness till well past 3 years old.
Well, see, that's
Yeah.
that's. It's probably not true, but
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Hyperbolically
Sure.
speaking.
No, I would. That's what I'm saying. But that's part of the greater debate.
Sure.
Right. So some people would say, is it okay to terminate someone's life who is born with, severe mental incapabilities? I guess I would say, like someone who is born with like
Down syndrome.
Well,
not
question.
Down syndrome, but there are more severe cases. There is a I forget the name of it. There's a condition in which some children are born with the top part of their craniums missing. That includes a big chunk of their brain.
Basically a vegetable for the rest of their lives.
Pretty much like someone who can like move. They got motor skills, but they are somewhat in a vegetative, non-conscious state, unaware state. I forget the name of the condition. Right. Is it then immoral to terminate that human's life?
Yes.
Do you know beforehand that
Usually they can pick it up. Yeah.
so they can pick it up? And are you 100% sure?
Yeah.
They can pick it up, and most children die within like a few hours, maybe a couple of days of being born. There is a case of a girl in Florida I read about who, I forget, her name is Baby. They call her Baby, sort of with the L. Regardless, she is a few months. She went a few months. I think she might be still alive. She's like still living. She can eat. She digests food, and the parents, they take care of her. But that's the argument. Back to the abortion thing. The argument lies within this, right? Are we killing a person, right? Because what happens if you're killing a person without justifying it?
It's murder.
That's murder.
Yeah. I think to touch on what Mac was saying, I think he was just describing the DNA, that you can tell that it isn't just that there is something that's happening.
Yeah.
So when people try and justify abortion, that they don't even look like anything's happening. You know what I mean? That they're saying that it's nothing until it has a beating heart, until it has organs. It's basically nothing. So you can do whatever you want with it because it's at that point in time nothing. And what was the thing that you just said? You were talking about the person. Is it justifiable to kill them if they're missing half their head? I think that once you start making, I think it's a scary world. Once you start being able to
say who, when.
Yeah, basically dictate. Your quality of life is at this sort of a certain standard, and because of that, you don't have the right to birth.
Let's say,
or because because you won't be able to have kind of a gauge to measure. This is the perfect standard of life, that you're going to be able to go to school, that you're going to be able to do this, that these certain things are going to happen, that you're weren't born with an umbilical cord wrapped around your arm. Now you have to go through life without having an arm or certain.
If I can cut in 2 points.
Let me just finish.
Sure, go ahead. After I want to make 2 points.
Yeah. So I think that once you start making those choices and dictating, this life is worthy of actually being born. This is now, again, these are all cases that are super rare to have a child with that. I mean, it's probably, again, that disease is probably in the 1%, if not lower.
Less.
And even then,
0.01?
You're basically saying, where do I set the boundary? When is it okay to say this isn't okay to have a child? When he has this, when he has that. And when you give people freedom, obviously they'll use that for evil.
So just to double check, guys, we're talking about abortion as a whole. 86% of abortion as a whole is done for convenience sake. Not that the child has any issues, not that the mother has any issues, not that the circumstance is that she can't afford it, or for any other way. It is just for the pure reason that I might want to go party on Saturday.
I don't want to have
I just don't want to have a kid.
I just don't have a kid.
I feel like I'm not ready.
We are
right now.
talking, guys, about the worst case scenarios that you might possibly think of. There's a reason. Now, I'm going to throw out this one thing. If we're going to say that a child is going to be born and 4 weeks later it's going to die, well, how about children who are born in Africa and that they won't have food because not of a condition of how they're born in, it's because of where they're born. Should we, because they're going to already be born into poverty and die, which is a large statistic that they will be born and die in Africa, should we then say we should just kill them there because the quality of life that they would have is better, that they should not be born in the first place.
Okay, this just comes back to what we were discussing earlier about personhood. Because if you don't draw the line between who's a person and who's not a person, then you could apply that argument to people who are living in Africa today and say, well, their quality of life is not good and they'd be better off if they were dead, so why don't we just kill them now? So you have to figure out, when does the baby become a person?
Just to double up on that, if the question would be thrown out there, that not the question, but the idea would be thrown out there that I don't want to have a kid because I won't be able to give it the proper education, to give it the proper food, or to give it the life that it deserves. Well, because you as a mom think, not necessarily that you, maybe things might end up differently, but because you think that I can't give them that, I'm just going to make the choice he doesn't deserve a life at all. So now we're talking about the topic of abortion. Now we talked about the rare cases of when the thought might be, but we're going to try to explain that whether it's the 86%, the 13%, or the 1%, we're going to try and talk about, when is it ever correct that life should be taken away? Is that even something that there should be, that life can be taken away? Yes, this is why. These are the right here, the rules of when a life can be taken away. Now, let's go around and say, Ovi, when would you say that a life could be accepted to be taken away? You're the mom. Some people might say that if you don't allow abortion, you're taking away the rights of the mother. You're taking away the choice.
Well,
of the
yeah,
mother.
that's what I was going to get to. Before we even get into when is abortion okay, we have to talk about what is abortion. Are you killing a person or not? So two things. When does it become a person? And the second thing, whose choice is it, or kind of what relationship does the fetus have to the mom? Is it the mom's choice? Does she have a choice? Is it her right to terminate the pregnancy? So when does it become a person, so that we can later figure out that it is the mom's right to either murder a person or kill a person, or just kill a fetus?
Right, because this is the difference between abortion and, I don't know, slaying your own child.
Yeah.
Right? The argument often is that we need to empower women to choose when they can be parents, when they should become parents, right? We need to empower women. Well, often you hear that, abortion, forcing women to become mothers, is women enslavement. It's not. It's immoral. We have this concept of the right of self-autonomy. I saw this example given recently. It's like, that if your twin brother dies or gets in a car accident, and he needs a blood transfusion badly, and you're the only one who can match in the whole world to give him a blood transfusion, no one can force you to give him a blood transfusion. You could choose not to give your blood, right? No one can force you. It's immoral to force you to give him that blood transfusion. That's kind of like an example, or a metaphorical example. We can talk about that in a second. But that's the idea, right? You gotta stop the pregnancy before it's too late, in a sense. Before you've now, in lack of better words, forced that girl to become a mother. So she should be allowed to terminate that pregnancy before she becomes a mother. Before it's a person. Sure. And that's what we're trying to, I guess that's what the debate's all about. Before it's a person. Is it a person?
When?
One of the things that, I did a research paper on abortion last year. One of the things that I found shocking was that the majority of abortions happen after 10 weeks of gestation. That means after 10 weeks of pregnancy. That's 2 months and a bit. Now, what I was shocked to find was that the research that I was doing, I had this book called The Handbook on Abortion, and they had these pictures of a encased baby or fetus, whatever your preference is to refer, 10 weeks old, maybe even 9 weeks, I can't remember. And it was just in the palm of this doctor, somebody wearing a nitrile glove. And in the picture it said, at this late in the gestation period, the fetus already has all of its organs
Functioning.
fully developed and most of them functioning. So one of the things they're finding is that also the baby or the fetus has developed neurosensors pretty early on. One of the things they notice is that when touching an 8-week-old fetus, 8 weeks old, it retracts as if it feels pain, right? Well, that's what it is. It senses something invading. They just, with a very thin needle, went up there and just pricked the foot, and it just reacted.
Wow.
So that's at 8 weeks old. So this is one of the things that's troubling. One of the most troubling things about this debate is that you're allowed to have an abortion up to 25 weeks in most places, from my understanding. After 20 weeks, one of the procedures that they do is just basically a cesarean section. They just cut the mother open, pull the baby out. In some cases, the baby comes out and lets out some cries. I read the testimonies of an ex-abortionist in that same handbook where he performed these kinds of abortions on late pregnancies, 20, 22 weeks, and sometimes he just dropped the placenta on top of the fetus or the baby, I would call it a baby, to smother it, to kill it faster.
Suffocate it.
To suffocate
Well,
it.
now that we're on this topic, do you want to explain to us some of the several methods that are used to kill these babies? Because people think, abortion, and they think it's just a fetus, and you just erase it like you would delete a file off of your computer.
Right, so one of the things that I heard, one of the arguments I heard is, well, it's not the mom's fault. The mom doesn't want to be a mother, and it's not her fault then if you remove the fetus and the fetus cannot thrive outside of that environment, outside of the womb. The fact of the matter is, other than the cesarean section form of, I forget what it's called. It's not called the cesarean section. It's called something else when they physically remove the entire baby out at over 20 weeks. But other than that form of abortion, every other form of abortion involves some form of direct method of termination. One of the more gruesome ones is more commonly used in the States. I don't know how often it's used now. It's called saline poisoning. So they put a big needle in the womb and they inject high saline content into the substance, high salt substance into the womb. And what happens then is just that fluid fills the womb, and then the baby ingests it, it goes in, and it chokes and it burns, and often takes 1 to 2 hours for the baby to die or for the life to be terminated, and then the mother will within 2 days pass it naturally as stillborn. The thing is, when these babies come out, they come out like beet red, and they're called candy apple babies because the salt solution burns the skin off, the outer layer of the skin. So they come off this dark reddish burgundy color. They're called candy apple babies. Most of the women who go through with these types of abortions are deeply affected psychologically afterwards, because
you see a red baby
not only that, but after the saline solution is administered, often the baby will thrash because it's in pain, it's in distress.
So the mother will inside of her womb feel a thrashing,
the
dying
thrashing
baby
of the baby inside the womb for 1 to 2 hours because it's clearly in distress.
If I can pause you for a second before you continue. If you guys are paying attention to this, in World War II, when they would gas the Jews, that would be over in less than 2 to 5 minutes. If you guys are hearing what's happening to 60 million babies and counting...
Well, I wouldn't say 60 million because, like I said, not all of them are saline poisoning, but...
Yeah.
So let's say the majority...
A percentage of those babies are killed in this manner.
Let me explain.
Yeah.
The majority of abortions happen 10 weeks onwards. Now we just explained
that they already have the receptors to feel the
As
pain.
early as 8 weeks.
As 8 weeks. Do you guys understand that any method,
It involves pain.
whether the child is born 2 weeks out of the womb, does it have its consciousness that it knows that you're going to cut its head off? No.
Just a second.
Does it have it 8 weeks in the womb? No. Are you doing the exact same thing? 100% you are. So now you have to justify, if we would do baby photos, I believe previous to 8 weeks.
Right, okay, so it's
you could have a baby photo and add it in your album. 1 week after, that would be another photo in the album.
So,
Continue.
it's called this hysterectomy when they do the cesarean style removal of the child. They just cut the mother open, pull the child out, let him die because the lungs are underdeveloped enough to breathe air, so it suffocates. A hysterectomy, the saline poisoning. Another method is, one of the ones that people think is, it's not a big deal, is the vacuum. They put the high pressure vacuum up there, and they think it just sucks out the fetus, like you would maybe a Lego piece with your vacuum cleaner in a house. It's not actually just a vacuum that's big enough to just suck up the fetus. Like I said, most of the abortions happen after 10 weeks, the majority of them. So the fetus is not small enough for a vacuum to just
It rips it
suck
apart.
it. Exactly. The fetus is a considerable size. Maybe enough to fit in the palm of your hand, but it looks like a baby now. What happens is it's a very small needle vacuum, a high-pressured vacuum, about 40 times stronger than a regular household vacuum. And what happens is this needle, because that suction is concentrated at the very fine point, it rips the body apart in chunks. So it starts tearing off the flesh off the fetus. It tears off the foot, and then the leg, and then the body, and then on and on and on to the head. So effectively, it is quicker than the saline poisoning, obviously, but it's not like you're just removing the baby from the mother and because it can't thrive outside of a womb, hey, that's not the mom's fault. You're effectively
Actively destroying the fetus.
Destroying the fetus.
You're not just removing it and then letting it die on its own.
Right. The vacuum only works up to a certain
Age.
gestation period. I forget, maybe it's about 16 weeks. I could be wrong about these numbers. Like I said, it was a while ago. I looked this up last year. After that time period, they do, I forget this name too now, but they basically use tools like forceps and scissors. And one of the methods, so that they don't have to dismember and pull out piece by piece, is they try to get the baby turned around, and they try to get the crown of the head showing out of the vaginal canal. And then what they do is they puncture a hole through the baby's head, and they use a high pressure vacuum and suck out the brains. Why do they do that? So then they can use forceps to crush the cranium. Remember, even when a baby's born, the plates on the head haven't all connected yet. It takes about a year after they're born to connect. So they puncture through that hole, they suck out the brains, and now because the plates are all not connected, it's fairly easy to crush the head and make the baby now thin enough to pull out. If that doesn't work, if they can't get the baby turned around, they will go in there with scissors, forceps, and they will dissect. They will cut off limbs. They will go in with forceps, tear a part of the torso out, pull it out, go in with forceps, crush the head, and as much as they can, and pull it out piece by piece.
Yeah. Is it feeling everything at this point in time?
Yeah, babies feel. I don't know if they have some kind of method in which they, sedate the baby. I think they might. I haven't looked into it too far. They might have some kind of method even in which they can inject, like I said, something similar to the saline, inject in, terminate the life of the baby first, then dissect it. I'm not sure. But if the baby is alive and well, thriving like it normally would, then it would feel everything.
Before we continue to anything onwards, guys, at that point in time, you're sedating it because you know it feels pain, because you know it's a human. Whether you take your friend and you sedate him and you kill him, does that change anything?
Right.
Because if is it
That's
less?
a good thing
yeah.
you bring. Sorry, continue.
Just thinking, because you sedate it, does it make it humane to actually go on through with it? And it's just disgusting to think that it's a casual thing. You know, people do it as a casual thing.
It
Make
is.
your appointment.
And interestingly enough, when you make your appointment and get there, they usually consult you about these things. You have a consultant there who you can talk to about how to do it the most humane way possible.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most common questions is, will it feel it? And then they consult you on that. And they say, well, there's this method, that method. We can do it like this. And usually there's some kind of pain.
I think that most of the mothers would be asking, will I feel anything, before they ask.
Right, she says that too. Is it going to hurt? But you'd be surprised at how many pregnant girls ask, well, will the baby feel anything? Will the fetus feel anything? Will it feel anything? A lot of times there's, post-traumatic stress after going through with an abortion. A lot of girls suffer from guilt.
Definitely.
Suffer from, did I do the right thing? Oh, what just happened?
I think there's tons of testimonies where that women have, resent the fact that they actually went through with an abortion, and that they end up having other children, and it affects their lives just having different children. Just to think that, you raise another child for the next, 15, 20 something years, and you see that this could have been the one that I aborted about, a couple years prior, and then you raise another child for 15, 20 years, you start thinking, what would have my child had this sense of humor? Would my child have done this? And it's
sad.
It makes what Hitler did to the Jews, it makes what Stalin did to his own people.
Nothing, not even comparable.
But to think it's such a casual thing and it's celebrated.
So let's continue.
That's the sad part. Though.
Let me just. So we talked. Sorry if to interrupt, but I'm gonna want you to answer this next one. We talked about what they do. We talked about when they feel it. We talked about when people would perform it, in what cases. We talked about the majority. Now, just to touch on the 13%, let's say I couldn't afford to feed it, or no. There's places that we could go. Adoption's always an option. There's food banks. If you would be active about it, I'm sure that wouldn't even be a scenario. Now, at that point in time, you're essentially saying that his life is should not be born in the case, but I'll still kill a human if it's, I believe. Now, this is where we're going to talk about. If you are pregnant, when do you know you're pregnant at the soonest? And when do we believe that it is a child at the soonest? Sure. Because if 2 weeks in the pregnancy, it's not a child, are we aborting a human? But sure. When is it a child? Is it when the semen goes into the egg? Is that when life is created? Before we talk about that, a lot of scientists will find a speck of dust on Mars, and they'll jump up and down and say, oh, we found it. We found life on Mars off of the smallest thing. But a sperm goes into an egg, and you see the DNA change. And scientists will say, that's not life. So let's continue and say...
Yeah, just before we get to that, the very sad thing about all of this is that when a girl decides to go through, or a woman decides to go through with an abortion, you can see that it's not very well thought out, and they're most likely acting, if not impulsively, they're acting under a lot of pressure because they feel so overwhelmed by the situation, and they think, well, either people are going to judge me because I'm not in a right position to be having the child, or I won't be able to take care of it, and they're just so overwhelmed that they don't stop to think about what's actually going on. And like Mickey said, later on, after they go through with it, they start contemplating, this could have been my child, this was actually a human being, and the gravity of the situation becomes apparent, and it's quite mentally torturous in a way to realize that what you've actually done. I don't think anyone can, at the end of the day, escape that, no matter how much you try to justify it. That's why you even see women asking, is it gonna feel the pain because they know on some basic level that they're terminating a human life, but they want to console themselves to make themselves feel better about this rash decision. And then later on that catches up with them. And that's the sad part. I think a lot of times women need to be more informed and counseled and maybe not looked down upon so much for being in that situation, because a lot of times they might do it to escape some social stigma with being associated with being a young mother.
Single mom.
And other things.
Sometimes.
Single mom, yeah.
So back to what you were saying is, first of all, there's not really hardly any method of detecting whether you're pregnant that early on. Usually you detect pregnancy about a month and a half, usually around the earliest. So it's very difficult to detect it before you miss your period. That's why for a girl. Usually the period's late, you start getting worried, you take some tests, you confirm with the doctor. Now it's 5-6 weeks in, you make a consultation with an abortionist. All that stuff takes time. You know, you're looking at now 2 months plus.
By 21 days, it already has a heartbeat.
Right. So,
In the majority of cases, people only find out they're pregnant by way too late. So the idea is that in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, or could it be terminated? Let's not even talk if it's a life in the first week. People only find out.
So that's why you don't see abortions at 4 weeks, 5
Yeah.
weeks, stuff like that early on, because you can't detect the pregnancy, you can't make the consultation, you can't get in there fast enough.
Yeah.
Back to what you said about life on Mars. I don't think anyone's saying though it's not life. They're saying it's not conscious life. So they're saying therefore it doesn't consist of a person. But here's the problem with that. Once conception occurs, you don't have to do anything more to that fetus, that zygote, whatever you want to call it. You don't have to do anything more but just let it grow. After a baby's born, other than give it nourishment or give him or her nourishment, you don't have to do anything else but let him grow. We're talking about, physical necessities, anatomical necessities. And it's the same thing for a fetus or a baby in the womb. Just needs nourishment through the umbilical cord. After a baby's born, needs nourishment and oxygen, let's say, right? Same thing with the fetus, though. It needs oxygen. It gets the oxygen through the umbilical cord, through the mother. Ironically, nothing changes after the baby's born. Still needs the parents to nourish it. Still needs the parents to make sure it's safe and it doesn't get smothered and that it can breathe. And you know what I mean? You don't have to do anything to that life after conception, but let it grow. So to abort would be effectively terminating that process of life, right? That human from its growth process. Here's my question now, though. They say it's not conscious life because it hasn't yet obtained that level of consciousness, mind, whatever, right? So it's not a person yet. But what if you get to the other spectrum of life, the other end? What if now you're pushing 90, 91, and you got cerebral deterioration, you got Alzheimer's, you have all these diseases deteriorating your brain. If you're losing consciousness you previously had, does that mean you're losing personhood? Does that mean you were 100% person and now you're 90% person? Are you going down and once you get to a certain level of consciousness, you're now not considered a person anymore? Therefore, you see what I mean? So it's like this weird scenario where you're not sure, and we're not how to say it? We're not. When you go through an abortion, it's like you're gambling on the side of the negative.
On the house's side.
No,
Instead of giving it the benefit of the doubt, you're saying instead of being from the gray to white line, you're on the gray to black line.
Exactly.
Where you rather risk it.
So let's say you don't know if it's a person.
Yeah.
You don't know if it's a person.
You take the chance that it's not. Cause
I'd like to hear some solid reasons for thinking it's not a person. Because so far I haven't heard any.
The issue is when you talk about consciousness, even from my idea of that is that
it's going to obtain that consciousness. It's a human. Like I said, if we take a photo, if you would have a whole photo album of your whole life, the photo album wouldn't necessarily start when you come out the womb. No, it starts at 9 weeks. It starts before that. And you're saying, whoa, how about when the baby's born? The baby can't take care of itself.
Well,
does that mean at
hold
that
on.
point in time it's useless because it can't bring its own food?
I'd like to play devil's advocate here, and let's think about it this way. Let's concede that it is a person.
Yeah.
Just like the example you brought up earlier, where your twin brother is in a car accident.
Yeah.
He's a person. There's no denying it. But you have your own rights, your own autonomy, and even though you're the only one who can supply him with the blood transfusion that he needs, nobody can force you because you have your rights. So it is a human baby, and it's a person. Let's just concede that,
Yeah.
hypothetically speaking. But now we're going to look at it from this way. Sure, what if it is a human person? The mom still has the right not to be
Self-autonomy.
enslaved
Yeah.
and go through
So
with that unwanted pregnancy.
What you're saying is the mom still has the right to self-autonomy. So no one, it shouldn't be right to force her to go through with the pregnancy she doesn't want to go through with.
That's my devil's advocate position.
Right.
Yeah.
And the example is the blood transfusion. Nobody can force the twin to give blood. That's not right. Well, here's the problem with that argument. Let's say the argument, or rather, let's say the principle from the blood transfusion example applies to the abortion. Nobody can force the mom, just as nobody can force the brother. Let's say the principle applies. Let's just say for a second. I don't think it does, and I'll explain why in a second. But let's say the principle applies. If that brother, the only person on the earth alive who can give blood to his twin brother, refuses, nobody can force him, true. That still doesn't mean that it's an incredibly disgusting, selfish, and immoral act. Let's be serious, right?
Yeah.
That still doesn't make... If that's the best argument, then what does that say about the abortion person, right? The person going through, rather, with the abortion. What does that say?
Even though it's their right,
Even though it's their
still
right,
disgusting.
it's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that's a horrible thing. Okay? So you're going through with something very horrible. That's if the principle applies. I don't think it does. Here's why. The twin who is in the car accident is now in a state of distress. They're not thriving towards life. They are effectively dying. Their life is about to be terminated. And unless you intervene, they will die. However, in the abortion example, the fetus or the baby is not in a state in which it is dying. It's in a state in which it is thriving towards life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you leave it, it will continue to thrive and grow and live. So for you to now intervene and go through with the abortion is not like saying the mom has the right to abort and not go through with the pregnancy, just like the twin has the right to not give the blood transfusion. You are not the twin in the position of whether or not you can give the blood transfusion. You are the car accident.
Causing him to be
You
dying.
are the one who is causing that state of life going into a state of dying or death and distress. So that's why the principle doesn't apply. You're not the person who is whether I give this person blood transfusion, they'll live or die, right? Because the twin's in a state in which they're dying, and unless you intervene, they will die. However, the baby is not in that state. It's not like, unless I intervene and let my pregnancy continue. No, the abortion is the intervention. Yeah. You're right. You're not the person giving the blood. You're the car accident. Right.
I also think that most of the times when I ever run into a situation where somebody is kind of speaking for being pro-choice and whatnot, it's normally has little to do with the child itself. It's never a thinking for the child. None of the cases are mainly for the child. It's kind of in a selfish position where you think more of the mother, where you think more of the circumstances. It's all, you're basically basing it on hypothetical situations for the child. You're basing it on selfish reasons for the mother. And then again, you get that 1%, which is so rare to have your father rapes you and you think that the quality of life, it's just the 1% can be so left, it can be so right, but there is that 1%. But even then, you can still put up a really good argument why the child should still have life. And then we talk about the other 99% where it just seems immoral. It seems unjust when you talk about a woman's right, to do whatever she wants with her body.
Yeah, you can't tell a woman what to do, they say.
I think at one point in time when you have a child, it's not just your right at that point in time.
Exactly. Your rights end where my rights begin, and my rights end where your rights begin.
Right.
So just in the same way as if I choose to drive intoxicated, that's my choice to put myself in that position, and
Right,
you're
and
allowed to
what you
intervene to
just
stop
said,
me from that.
your rights end where my rights begin. So that's why this idea of is it a person is so crucial. Because if it's a person, they have rights like everybody else.
You're imposing in their rights when you cause an abortion.
They have rights like everybody else, and you cannot put them in a state in which they're going from a state of thriving towards life to distress and death.
One thing that I would say is that it's not necessarily the best thing, but usually when I think about it, to be a mom is like to have sex is kind of like the idea of having a driver's license, right?
It's getting behind the wheel.
When you go for your road test, you know what you're doing, or at least you should. You're tested on it, what happens. And when you get behind the wheel, there's consequences. If I hit your car, I'm going to have to pay for that. If I get into an accident, I could get sued. There's a lot of consequences but
Potential consequences.
Yes, previously to getting behind the wheel, you know these things. And if you don't know these things, the consequences are still there. Now here, where we're at, all of us are educated in school at a very young age about what happens when you have sex, that you'll have a child. That's just very common knowledge now.
That's how children are conceived, yeah.
So, I would have to say, if you're not ready to have a kid, because that is something that might happen while you're having sex, even if you're using condoms or if you're using birth control, there's still the chance. If you're not ready to take control and you say, she's pregnant, now I have to take care of the kid, I don't believe you're ready to have sex.
So the statement then would be like, as the same way as if you were driving, if you're not prepared to deal with the potential consequences, then you shouldn't be doing it, right? You can't get in a car and say, I'm going to start driving, but I don't ever want to have an accident. I'm not prepared to deal with that. I'm not prepared to having a flat tire. I'm not prepared to deal with my engine blowing on me. I'm not prepared.
I don't have money. I don't have money if my engine blows on me. Probably shouldn't own a car.
Refill
but you
the
still
tank.
do. You still own a car. So the idea with it, guys, is that if you would get into a car accident and you say, whoa, let's erase it. Don't want to deal with it. That's not my thing. Well, I don't got money to pay for that. I can't man up to that kind of situation, you know. It's actually for convenience sake, I'm going to erase that. Well, to be honest, that's not how the real life works. There's consequences. And the consequences when you have sex and you have a child, you can't erase that. And the consequences, you're taking life. It's murder, what we're doing. Now, just to clear, if people are watching this and they maybe had an abortion, we do not put you down. We understand that it is a very hard situation. I can't imagine what you guys went through, or even if you're thinking about it. But the whole point of this, guys, is to get you thinking. If anybody asks you, oh, I'm thinking about having an abortion, I'm thinking, I can't take care of it, it's to better equip you for the future and to take this serious. We're talking about millions of children dying. That's what it is, because we do believe. This is not from any biblical standpoint, which if we would bring the Bible into this, we'd have a lot to say. We're just talking about human rights. We're talking about life and death. We're talking about killing and murder.
We're just talking about the actual facts of what's going on, because too many people are not interested in this. They're more interested in doing the actions but not knowing what's behind the actions. They're more interested in their own gain from a situation, which in the end most people would end up losing. You lose a child, you lose you end a life that could have been something, and at any point in time, at any point in time, I think that when you do, and I would go as far as with the 86%, obviously it's a selfish act, even when you have that other percentage where it'll hinder their lives, or it might put them in a bad situation. I think that whenever you have a kid, it might set you back, you know what I mean, depending on your situation. I don't think you should go into thinking that this is a way to end of a life because it's going to affect me. I think that with a lot of this, people need to be educated. They need to know exactly what an abortion is. Most people don't even know what goes. They know the word. They know that abortion just means I'm not having a child, but they don't know what it entails. And also listening to us, I think it's important that everybody should do their own research behind all this, because I think that you'll find more, and you'll probably be even more disgusted than what even Ovi was saying about abortions. You guys need to take in consideration that these are children, that these are possibilities, that they are actual lives, that you are physically, that you are physically ending, and it's just a barbaric act. I think at the end of the day, when, like Alex said, with the whole driving, and the people aren't ready, but they want to go behind the steering wheel and they want to drive, and they don't want to man up to their, if they hit someone, they don't want to man up. They want to say, hey, I shouldn't have been driving in the first place, or I wasn't ready, I didn't have my driver's license, so I shouldn't be convicted of anything. It's a responsibility when you decide that you're going to go into something like that and do this act. It's a responsibility that people just don't want to man up to. At the end of the day, people get out of everything. It's just the same thing of not manning up to most of your other problems that you won't.
In many situations of let's just finish off with the topic of if abortion is alright with rape. In many times there's actually Facebook groups or even open posts and forums where the mom says, I was thinking about aborting the child. I was raped and I was thinking about aborting, but I didn't want the child to suffer because of what the father did. So I had the child, and she's my best friend. I love her. I could never think about taking away her life. Now the idea is, sometimes the mom would say, I could never look at the child and not see the husband, the man who raped me. How could I raise his child? How could I? And it's a very touchy situation, this. But let's end this whole conversation with, Ovi, you give a thought. Alex, you give a thought. And then you can end it after that, please.
So in the case of rape, if it's a person, I think it is a person, you can't punish one person for the crimes of another. I think this has to do with objectivity, right? So, most mothers will tell you that comes from struggling with deep psychological issues after having experienced rape. Yeah. The idea that you're now pregnant with the perpetrator's child, right? Most of the things you'll hear is like, I feel like a part of him is inside me. I feel like the child is, almost like a part of that human being, a little miniature him is now in here, and I could never look at him. I could never love that child. I could, etc., etc. Well, that's subjective, meaning that's just how you feel. And those feelings could be very real to you and very hard to deal with. But that doesn't objectively mean that child is that rapist or that person who did that, right? So if it is a person, you need to understand that it's a different person. It's not that perpetrator. It's not the rapist. It's not the person who made you a victim of rape. So if it's a person we're talking about, then literally punishing one person for the crimes of another. taking their life because, and I understand, I couldn't imagine what it's like to deal with something like that. But like you mentioned, there's lots of support groups out there. There's lots of people willing to lend a helping hand, and things like that. So yeah, I would say that you're dealing with the subjective, how you feel, but what you end up going through with an abortion, if that's what you choose, is a very objective thing. So it's not just how you feel that needs to be taken into consideration, but what's actually happening. So
Good viewpoint.
I agree on it. I couldn't have said it better myself. Mickey, do you have any other comments?
I think we basically talked about everything.
Do you want to close in prayer?
sure, just one thing I want to say that I thought about this abortion thing when I did my research paper. I know we weren't going to say anything, I guess, theologically or biblically.
Sure.
I think as Christians, because even some Christians, you'd be surprised how many Christians are pro-choice up to a certain point. They feel like these are professing Christians. I mean, the Bible clearly says that it is God who breathes life into all human beings, right? It was God who breathed life into Adam. It was God who knit me in my mother's womb, the psalmist says. So, literally what the Bible teaches is that from the moment of conception, God is implicated in the creating of your life. Meaning, there's no kind of period in the womb, during gestation, where God is not involved. There's just biology happening, and then he jumps in and he starts interacting with the human life that's in there. The Bible literally teaches that from the moment of conception, during the period of gestation, God is implicated with this person's development in life. So we can't play with this as Christians, I don't think. Another thing I thought about recently is how the Bible teaches that sin is often repetitive. You'll be interested to know that in the book, in the Old Testament, the Israelites and the Canaanites, they did this thing where they sacrificed their children to this god called Moloch. The reason behind it is so interesting. They did it basically for a better life. They were told that if they sacrificed their children to Moloch, Moloch would give them better harvest, bring the rain, give them wealth, bless them in these areas. So the reason for sacrificing their children, bringing them to Moloch, where they would burn these children alive in this bronze bull's hands, was for a better life.
Wow.
It's so interesting to me to see that the Bible teaches Moloch, all along, this god, was nothing. He was nothing. Paul says it. They're just stone. These idols of bronze, they're nothing. There's no god there. You guys know that, right? There's no
doesn't exist.
There's no god called Moloch.
Piece of metal.
It's a figment of our imagination. So Moloch was just the face those people put on this atrocious act to justify what they were doing.
Yeah.
Right? For the idea that they would end up with a better life. Now, I basically see this whole abortion thing and the fact that almost 90% of abortions happen for convenience sake, for a better life, as it were, is Moloch rehashed.
Wow.
They're killing their babies just at an earlier stage so that they can justify it and feel better about themselves while doing it for a better life. We feel like we're so educated in the 21st century, so we would never say something silly like sacrifice your children for a better life to a god. That's barbaric. However, I will sacrifice my children and kill them for me.
For a better life, for me.
For me.
So instead of doing it for a figment of your imagination, which is Moloch,
right?
You're doing it.
It's interesting because
we're taking Moloch, the god, out of the picture.
Moloch was nothing, Moloch
and now we're just putting ourselves in.
Paul makes it clear in the New Testament that the idolatry wasn't so much the idol itself, but it was the acts of the idolatry. It was the act of burning your child for a better life. It was the act of having orgies. It was all of these things Paul called idolatry. But he explains that the idols were nothing, right? The acts in themselves was what the manifestation of that idolatry was.
Well, question. let's say I'm not a believer of the Bible. I don't believe the Bible is true. I think it's a story. Let's say it like that. Aren't there other religions that implicate killing your child as well for some sort of, let's say, not necessarily harvest but better life? Let's say something like that. Is there no other religion that has that kind of, let's say, pagan religion that has that kind of?
Well, sure, lots of ancient pagan religions involved human sacrifice, and quite often.
So with that being said, take it from the Bible or take it from anywhere else. It's being done, and it's being done nowadays as well. Though we believe the Bible, we believe in the Bible. So it's a very relevant story to us how we live as Christians. That what are we making as idols? And what are we replacing it with from back to now? How are we just changing a few ingredients in there?
The thing is, back then, they weren't so self-sufficient as we are now. We have technology, we have public transport, we have healthcare, we have internet, we have information at our fingertips. The reason why they killed their children for Moloch is because Moloch could provide that better life. We do it for ourselves now because we can provide a better life for ourselves. We don't need to go to Moloch.
So we think.
We don't need to go to Moloch
Yeah.
to give us a better life. We can give ourselves a better life. We just need to offer up our children on the altar of that.
Wow.
So just a little bit of theological 2 cents.
If there's anything I know about God, it's that God hates abortion. So for all those Christians out there who would support abortion, I would suggest thinking twice.
If we could talk about the whole abortion talk without necessarily bringing God into the picture and kind of not, I would say, prove that it's murder. Now with bringing God in the picture, as a Christian, I don't believe in any stance we could ever agree with abortion. It's just the way that it is. I don't believe that Christ in anywhere the Bible taught that we should put ourselves ahead of anybody else. So with that being said, could you end in prayer?
Sure. Heavenly Father, thank you for the discussion and conversations we could have tonight. Lord, we hope that if anybody was considering this, that they would take some of the things said into consideration. We pray, Lord, that you let the people know and you reveal to them that the people who have gone through with abortions, that there's always forgiveness and grace at the cross. We pray that you would have mercy on us and that you wouldn't abandon this nation or these people to the such sins, Lord.
Mm-hmm.
We pray that you would work in our society through your body, Lord Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us. God bless.
God bless. And if you guys have any more topics that you guys would want us to discuss, leave a comment on the Facebook page, leave a comment on the video in the comment section below. And God bless you guys from all of us here at Humbled by Your Grace Ministries.